idea how to follow that amazing talk that Baha just shared with all of us. I actually really wasn't sure the sexual reference and had to ask around the table to see if there was this boy toy here, and who was it? So amazing. So yeah, this has been so fun. A lot of you I do not know yet. A lot of you are familiar faces that I'm super excited to see again. And I want to first share the story of how I even got to be a part of this particular challenge walk. So I'm going to put Rich on the spot here. About 6 weeks ago, has anyone ever gotten a text message from somebody not labeled in your phone, and you want to be like, who is this? So I get a text message at 9 o'clock at night, and it just says, my foot's not hurting today, but my shoulder is. And I sat here and I was like, I have no idea who this text message is from. And normally I would write back, sorry, wrong number, but I actually heard, no, respond, did you mean to text Carlyn? So instead I wrote back, did you mean to text Carlyn? And that's when I get this reply, no, I meant to text my son, the doctor, but hi, this is Rich, Israel. And I was like, what? I haven't talked to Rich in probably 5 years. So, as it turns out, I had just decided that same week that I was going to come back to San Diego and live for the month of November. So I got the opportunity to tell him I'm going to be in town, and that's when he said, oh, it's Challenge Walk month. And I said, well, perfect. Let's figure out a way for me to be a part of it, because I would love to come be a part of it. And then he said, well, why don't you Google Cheryl? She's who our speaker is, which is when I texted him back this picture. I'm like, this Cheryl? Cheryl and I have been friends for 10 years. If she's the speaker, I'm definitely coming on Friday night. So it's really amazing how this all came together. This also shows that there's no such thing as an accident, because I couldn't have planned this any better if I had tried. So I'm really grateful that the MS Society has asked me back. I want to start by sharing a little bit of my story, since most of you aren't aware of it, and it's kind of what brings us all here together tonight. I'm 39 years old now. It was 1997. I was 19. I was a sophomore at Indiana University, and I was diagnosed with MS. I remember my arm being tingly, and I remember taking a shower and not being able to feel the water hitting it, but I really didn't know what that meant. The next day, I woke up and my whole left side felt like it was asleep. So I specifically remember calling my mom on the cordless phone, because this was the 90s, and saying, Mom, have you ever slept so hard that your whole side fell asleep? She was like, no, that sounds kind of crazy. And then it was my right scalp that was numb, and then it was my torso that was so numb. I was leaning against the stove, actually didn't even know the burner was hot. And then it was my eyesight in my right eye. So with all of this, I was very fortunate at the time that my neighbor in Greenville, South Carolina, where I was from, had actually graduated from Indiana University, and his friend was a back and neck specialist on campus. Because I'd gone to the hospital to get an x-ray thinking I might have pinched a nerve, because I was actually on the crew team for a hot second, because I had a crush on a guy on the crew team. So I thought maybe that rowing motion, I had done something, right? But the hospital was like, no, you don't have anything, take some aspirin and come back if it hasn't gotten any better. So I went to a back and neck specialist. He was like, close your eyes, let me know when I've touched you with the needle and with the cotton swab. And I'm like, okay, ready. And I didn't even realize he touched me with anything, which is when he said it was time for me to go get an MRI. So again, I'm 19 years old. I'm not thinking anything. They tell me I can bring a CD with me to the MRI, so I picked Dave Matthews. And, again, it's the 90s. And I proceed to get my MRI. A few days later, I get a call I got a message on my answering machine, and the lab instructed me to call back to tell me that I had lesions and that they thought it was MS. Well, all I heard was MD. I'd never heard of MS, so I immediately thought Jerry Lewis Telethon. That's all I had any knowledge of. I immediately called my dad, hysterically crying, thinking I was never gonna walk again. And my dad jumped in the car and drove up to school the next day. And from there, we went and got the spinal tap. And from there, I learned that I had multiple sclerosis. At the time, there was no one that we knew with MS. We knew of Richard Pryor, and I had absolutely nothing in common with him, so I didn't really understand how I could have MS because we didn't really have any similarities. My parents didn't know of anybody with MS yet, but luckily, we had the MS Society. You have to realize this was 97. This was before Google was invented. There was no search engine optimization. There was no social media. There was no rabbit hole to go down. When you were given something, you were given something, and you didn't look anywhere outside of yourself for any answers. You had to be resourceful, and you had to go within. So luckily with the MS Society, I typed in their email, their web address, and that's where I got to learn all that I could, and that's where I learned that MS wasn't a death sentence. Because a lot of people were thinking that my life was over. But I had a really big wake-up call, actually, after my diagnosis. So I didn't have too much time to dwell about what MS was going to do to me, because I wondered, am I gonna be in a wheelchair? Am I ever gonna walk again? Like, what does this mean? Because within 10 months of my MS diagnosis, both of my best friends were killed in 2 separate car accidents. One of them the first month after my diagnosis. So while some people were thinking, MS, your life is over, I had a very hard reality of what it meant to have something happen like that. I learned very quickly that not only was I not invincible because I was given MS, but that life can change in a moment. And it didn't happen overnight, but within a few months of my acceptance of the MS, also became this awareness that it wasn't just me living for me, it was me living for my friends. Because it was this whole aha that I was still alive and I could still move. And so that is how my journey began with my diagnosis. So I want to transition a little bit into saying how the MS Society has played a role during the last 20 years of my life. I can't believe it's been 20 years, by the way. It's like crazy to think that I've never been an adult without MS. My joke is that I've had MS longer than I was legally able to drink. So it was always this big, like, you can't card me, I have MS, right? Doesn't that qualify for something? So I moved to Dallas, Texas after I graduated from Indiana, and I was working at my first job, and that's when a guy came in to present a lunch and learn about the MS 150 bike ride. So at this point, I'd never met anyone that had it. It wasn't something I kept hidden. I would tell my professors at the beginning of each semester that I had MS in case I were to miss class. I was never someone that thought I had to hide my disease because I was really just thrown right into it. In fact, there was no CDs when I was diagnosed. So not CDs, but when we got our MRI images, they weren't on CDs. We actually got these big, huge images like this in these manila envelopes. So I was totally that college girl that kept him in her house and would turn the lights on and freak my friends out and be like, you guys want to see my brain? Like, it was like this weird acceptance, and this is how I ran with it, because it was still fascinating to me, like what was going on inside of me. So I joined so I got to Dallas, and that's when I was told about the MS 150 bike ride. And I walked up to the director when he was done presenting the lunch and learn, and I said to him, I've never met anybody that actually knows what it is I'm going through, but I have MS. And that's when he introduced me to a friends and family team, and for the next 2 years, I participated in the MS 150 bike ride. And I loved it so much because for the first time, it gave me a purpose, and it gave me a way to contribute to my cause. It gave me a way to show that I was thriving in what I was dealing with, and it gave my friends and family an incredible way to be supportive. So from Dallas, I moved to, from Dallas, I moved to San Diego. I bounced around a lot. So when I came to San Diego, I immediately called the MS Society to see how I could get involved. And that's when I learned that the chapter president at the time was Carlyn Shaw. And the reason I have to say this is my dad's name is Carlyn Shaw. So when I got here, I literally had an immediate family, and that is exactly how this chapter began to feel for me. I reached out to see what I could do. But before I had the opportunity to get involved as a challenge walker, I actually experienced my second exacerbation. And I woke up to go to work, and I couldn't get out of bed because my left leg was paralyzed. So at the time I drove a stick, so this meant I couldn't get to work either because I couldn't feel the clutch. And my whole life kind of came to a standstill, and it was the MS Society that really stood by me and helped me and kind of talked me through everything. You know, I had friends that would take me to go get my Solumedrol or whatever that we were doing at the time. And within the next year, I think it was the next year, I ended up going to Australia for 3 months after that because I was so aware that the MS could possibly keep me still. So I went to volunteer for a nonprofit in Australia for 3 months, and I really started embracing this life of allowing MS to motivate me and inspire me rather than keep me stuck. I ended up signing up for this challenge walk in 2006 by myself for my first walk. I didn't realize I was supposed to join a team, but I was so inspired by my dad, who now has done it 16 times, but at the time he was walking for me. And like Baha says, like when you're that person that's feeling good and you don't feel sick, and then all these people are doing things for you, you start to feel kind of like bad that everybody's doing stuff for you. So you're like, well, I want to do the stuff for everybody else that isn't doing as well as I am. So that's what inspired me to join the challenge walk. And that's where I met Lauren, who's here somewhere, who became my instant family. I walked with her in Chelsea on my very first walk. And then the next year I came back and I recruited another girl my age. And then the next year I came back and I recruited 5 other girls my age, and we formed Team Optimistic. So I don't know if you've ever heard about our teams, but we were the Optimistics with the M and the S capitalized. And just a little side note on how I made these friends that I recruited to walk with me since I was walking for them. There had been a women's luncheon in Dana Point, I guess it was 2007, which is actually where I met Cheryl. So when you walk into a women's MS event and you're 20, I don't know, I was probably like 27, you kind of walk in and you're like, where's the table of young people? Because I was the grandma of the bunch because I had it longer than most, but I was actually younger than everybody, so I never really knew where I fit in the MS world. And then I found this table of girls that were my age, and it was so amazing because we all had different neurologists, we were all on different medications, we were all experiencing it differently, but we had this amazing common denominator, and this is where our friendship began. And so these girls ended up coming to walk with me, and we came back 4 times, or I came back 4 times, and then the drug company Accorda, which is in Westchester, New York, actually selected our team for a documentary. It was called I Walk Because. Okay, so how many of you love just talking about whatever you want to talk about on these walks, right? I mean, we're here to walk it and talk it out. Okay, we were mic'd for 3 days on the challenge walk as 7 28-year-old, or however old we were, young ladies. And we had so much fun talking in here like, are you sure you're gonna have to edit this part out? But we had a blast. It was like having our wedding tape. So we had our old challenge walk tape. And so I'm gonna fast forward just a little, but I did all the challenge walks. Then I felt inspired to move to Wilmington, North Carolina. And with that move, part of the reason I moved there actually was I needed a little bit of a break from this MS role that I had taken on. It had become so much a part of my life. And I'd actually chosen to stop using my MS medication. I had been on Avonex, been on Copaxone. I was one of the first 10,000 in the States to go on Tysabri in 07. And 2.5 years into that, I made the personal decision, take myself off of it. This was before the JC virus was even associated with it. But I have been living without medication now for the last 8 years. And so in this decision of mine, and this learning of who I was and what my relationship to everything was, I just needed a break. So I moved to a city without an MS society. Only that little break didn't last too long because my friend got me on this little show with a guy named Anderson Cooper. And I got to share a bit of my story of how I become a runner with MS. You see, I signed up for my first half marathon in 2010, the Carlsbad half marathon, because I quit smoking of 15 years. It actually had nothing to do with the MS. But little did I know that this half marathon would change my life. So when I left Wilmington, I had this another itch to move to Denver, Colorado, which is where I live now. By the time I arrived in Denver, I'd run 8 half marathons, and I was itching to run a marathon. So I signed up for the Portland Marathon, and everyone followed, like, can this girl with MS, what is she doing? She's running marathons now, how is she doing it? And, I have this tattoo on the back of my neck. It says, love life. And I put this tattoo here the day I ran my 6th half marathon, which was the 2-year anniversary of being med-free, and it's right where my lesion is that caused my paralysis in my left leg. So I'm really a big proponent of the mind over matter and the choices we make. My mantra is we cannot control what happens to us, we control how we respond to it. And this is anything in life. And we're all human, we're here to feel emotion, we're not immune, but it's how long we hold on to it, and it's how long we hold on to that story and how we let that story define us. So when I got to Denver and I became this runner of the mountains now, something happened in 2013. Some bombs went off at the Boston Marathon, and man, was I pissed. Because I was born in Boston, and I had a lot of friends running Boston, so I made this decision. I have to run the Boston Marathon, only I'm not fast. And so I had no idea how I was gonna run the Boston Marathon, and then I learned that I could actually run with the New England MS Society. So I applied, and there's some people in this room here with the San Diego chapter. I stopped to call and give me a good word with the chapter so they would pick me, and I was selected, and I raised $7,500, and in 2015 I made my dream come true by running the Boston Marathon for MS. Only I didn't stop there. 7 months later I ran the New York Marathon for MS as well. So running has literally become my medication and my meditation. It's become a lot for me. Now living in Colorado, I hike, I bike, we have Hike MS, we have Muck Races, we have all come out to Denver. We have so many fun ways to be involved with the MS Society, and it's brought me to a point now where it's the friendships, it's the way that I can inspire others, it's the hope that I can give to anyone newly diagnosed. Because if you look around this room, every single one of us is only here for one reason. We're here because MS brought us here, whether it's for ourselves, whether it's for a loved one. And you have a hard time cursing something that feels so heavy that we wouldn't want for ourselves, because that would mean I wouldn't have any of you. It would mean I wouldn't have Cheryl. It would mean I wouldn't have Colleen. It would mean I wouldn't have Baha. And I mean I wouldn't have Rich. I wouldn't have any of you. So the silver lining to some things that we go through are these wake-ups that we have and these people that come into our lives. And I call these people strangers to friends. So my website is strangerstofriends.com. And I write about the way common denominators connect people. And I actually put on events that, unlike the support group that Baha walked into and didn't feel like she belonged, I completely know that feeling. I never belonged in any of the support groups I went into because I was young and I was optimistic and I wasn't being a victim and I was trying to thrive. And it didn't resonate with a lot of the people that I was meeting. So going back to the strangers to friends and how I'm gonna wrap this all up, when I found out Cheryl was talking tonight, I really just wanted to come and support her because of our friendship over the last 10 years. When she was first diagnosed, I was already 10 years into it or so. So I was one of the first friends that she made when she was diagnosed. And at that time, I was totally in awe of this girl that ran marathons because that was the furthest thing from my mind. And here we are, years later, and I'm excited that she has invited me to run a marathon with her in October. So I'm committing to my 4th marathon to run the Detroit Marathon with Cheryl and some other amazing individuals that run for MS and support MS. And so I just want to leave you all tonight in recognizing how we're all connected and leave here with a family, because I haven't been back here in 5 years and I get to walk in and I feel like I'm home. I wrote a speech and I didn't even open the paper. I just started talking. So I hope I said everything I wanted to say. But now it's my honor, and I would love to talk to anybody after this also and just meet you, because I just love the fact that this is why we get to connect and make a silver lining out of it. But before that, I have the opportunity to introduce Cheryl, and there's really not